there is something wrong with you. And the strangest part is, you already know it. You wake up and your hand moves toward the glowing screen before your eyes even fully focus. You do not check the time. You do not look at the room. You check the feed. You sit in silence for 30 seconds. But the quiet does not feel like rest. It feels like an itch under your skin, a phantom demand that you fill the space with noise. You finish watching one video, and instead of feeling satisfied, you immediately tap the next. You keep moving, keep scrolling, keep consuming. But somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet, uncomfortable truth takes root. You remember a time when things felt different, when the world felt richer, fuller, more real. You look out the window at the rain, and the color seems muted. The connection to the world outside is frayed. You are not imagining the distance. You feel it in the way you look at a landscape and immediately search for a way to capture it. Rather than simply being in it, life has started to feel thin, stretched out over 1,000 digital fragments. Something has genuinely changed, and by the end of this, you are going to understand exactly why. The reason you feel this persistent, hollow pull is not a character flaw. It is a biological collision. Deep inside your brain, there is an ancient reward system designed for a world that no longer exists. For thousands of years, this system kept your ancestors alive. Find food, get a chemical reward. Connect with others, get a reward. Solve a difficult problem, get a reward. That chemical is dopamine. It was never intended to be a constant stream. It was a fuel meant to motivate specific survival-critical actions. But then, the world accelerated. Every app on your phone, every notification, every infinite scroll is designed by teams of engineers who understand that reward system better than you do. They map the exact triggers that keep you reaching. They do not want you satisfied. They want you wanting. They have engineered a loop that exploits the exact same neural pathways that once helped humans survive in the wild. Lumi is not just living a life. Lumi is living inside a controlled environment built to harvest attention. Your brain treats every screen interaction as a vital task, firing reward signals for things that provide zero actual sustenance. You are running hardware from the Stone Age, trapped in a digital architecture that knows exactly how to keep the power on, ensuring your brain stays trapped in a cycle of craving that never, ever reaches a finish line. The first thing that breaks is your internal baseline. Your brain is a master of calibration, always adjusting what it considers stimulating enough to warrant your attention. When you feed it a steady, high-speed diet of bright, unpredictable digital content, it has to protect itself from being overwhelmed. It raises the bar. It recalibrates the threshold for what feels like a rewarding experience. This is where the erosion begins. You pick up a book, but the pages feel sluggish. You try to focus on the text, but your eyes dart toward the edge of the table where your phone sits, silent and dark. The book has not changed. The story is the same. Your brain has simply lost the capacity to find satisfaction in the slow, steady rhythm of reading. You walk through a park, looking at the changing leaves or the way the light hits the grass, but it feels like a chore. You find yourself searching for a soundtrack, a podcast, or a digital companion to fill the silence. That silence, which should be neutral, now feels like a vacuum. It feels like a malfunction. You are not losing your mind, but you are losing your ability to interact with the world at its own natural speed. Everything that does not provide an instant, high-intensity spike of stimulation starts to register as dull. The world is becoming flat, not because it lacks depth, but because your internal sensor has been tuned to only recognize the peaks. There is a fundamental misunderstanding that keeps you locked in this cycle. Most people assume dopamine is the chemical of pleasure. They believe that when they feel good, it is because their brain is flooded with it, but neuroscience tells a different, sharper story. Dopamine is not about enjoyment at all. It is the chemical of wanting. It is the urge, the anticipation, the frantic reaching toward a goal that remains just out of your grasp. Think of it as a biological compass that points only to more. When you scroll, your brain releases dopamine not because you are happy, but because you are hunting. You are in a state of high alert anticipation, convinced that the next swipe will finally deliver the reward you are looking for. But the actual experience of pleasure, the feeling of being satisfied, calm, or full, comes from entirely different systems. This is why you can spend an hour scrolling and end up feeling physically drained and mentally hollow. You have been chasing a phantom. You have been feeding the wanting system, which is designed to never be satisfied, while ignoring the pleasure system that actually requires you to stop and rest. Lumi knows this feeling well. The screen glows, the thumb moves, the brain signals more. And yet, when the session ends, there is nothing there, no actual nourishment, just the lingering, restless echo of a craving that was never meant to be fulfilled. You are getting exactly what the system is designed to provide, the chase without the catch. Lumi sat down on a Tuesday evening, intending to check one notification. The room was still, the light outside the window deepening into a soft, bruised purple. They picked up the phone. The screen flared to life, a small, artificial sun in the darkening space. Lumi began to scroll. The first 10 minutes passed with intent, but the focus soon dissolved into a rhythmic, automatic motion. The thumb moved, the eyes tracked, the brain responded to the flicker of incoming updates. There was no conscious thought, only the cycle of anticipation and the arrival of the next fragment. Lumi tried to put the device down twice, but the impulse to see what came next acted like a physical tether. When they finally looked up, the room was shrouded in near total darkness. The clock on the wall read 2 hours later. Lumi did not feel rested. They did not feel entertained. They felt a strange, hollow tiredness, a heavy sensation in the marrow of their bones, as if they had just finished a long, grueling labor that yielded nothing of substance. The silence of the apartment felt sudden and sharp. Lumi stared at the blank screen, the reflection of their own face distorted in the dark glass. It was not a mistake, it was a loop. And as the realization settled in, the terrifying part was not that they had lost the time, it was that the loop was never designed to end. It was built to keep them reaching, forever. Lumi decided that the only way out was to cut the signal entirely. They deleted every app, powered down the device, and placed it in a drawer under a stack of books. The first day was a vacuum. The second was a fight. By the third day, the silence in the apartment shifted from peaceful to aggressive. It pressed against their ears. It made the walls feel thin. Lumi paced the floor, hands twitching, looking for a distraction that was no longer there. Every ordinary object, a chair, a cup, a book seemed to mock their inability to just exist. The itch was not in the phone, it was in the brain. Screaming for the familiar, fast-paced stream of input, by the fifth night, at 11 o'clock, the discomfort reached a breaking point. It was not a choice, it was a surrender. Lumi pulled the phone from the drawer, hands shaking, and began the frantic process of reinstalling everything. As the loading bars filled the screen, the relief was immediate. Yet it was quickly followed by a crushing, cold weight of guilt. They had not been defeated by the technology. They had been defeated by the sheer unbearable pressure of their own thoughts. The cycle was not broken. It was stronger than before, and the failure to escape it felt like a permanent mark on their character. Lumi sat in the dark, bathed in the blue light of 1,000 incoming notifications, feeling more isolated than when they had started. Lumi realized that the sudden, violent break from stimulation was never going to work. The brain was not a switch that could be flipped. It was a muscle that had been trained for years to crave speed. They stopped trying to delete the world and started trying to endure the quiet. Each morning, Lumi set aside 20 minutes. No phone, no music, no tasks, just sitting in the chair by the window. The first few minutes were always the hardest. The brain, starved of its constant input, began to panic. It sent signals of urgency, a low-level hum of anxiety that made the legs want to pace and the hands want to reach for something to touch. Lumi felt the urge to jump up, to check the time, to find any distraction to quiet the buzzing behind their eyes. They ignored it. They sat through the crawling discomfort, watching the way dust motes drifted in the stagnant air. It was not peaceful. It was agonizing. Every second felt like an hour, and the silence seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. But they did not reach for the device. They let the agitation rise, crested, and slowly, very slowly, begin to settle. The goal was no longer to find joy in the stillness, but simply to prove to the brain that the silence could not kill them. Each session was a small, quiet victory over the immediate demand for relief. By the 9th day, the routine had become a ritual of endurance. Lumi sat in the same chair at the same hour, expecting the same familiar waves of restlessness. The morning air was cool, carrying the faint scent of damp pavement and distant trees. The silence was still present, but it had lost its sharp, aggressive edge. Lumi watched the sun climb over the neighboring rooftops, observing the way the light shifted across the floorboards. Then, it happened. A single beam of sunlight caught the edge of a ceramic mug on the table. It was not a grand event. It was not a spectacle. Yet, for reasons Lumi could not name, the sight of that light hitting the surface felt entirely different. It was sharp, clear, and undeniably vivid. The brain, finally unburdened by the relentless demand for the next, faster stimulus, was actually seeing the world again. A warmth moved through Lumi's chest, a genuine, unforced response that had nothing to do with a screen or a notification. The baseline had shifted. The environment, which had felt dull and gray for months, suddenly possessed depth and texture. Lumi leaned forward, eyes tracking the way the light danced on the table. For the first time in years, the act of simply existing was enough to command their full attention. The quiet was no longer a void to be filled. It was a canvas that had finally come into focus. With the baseline finally lowered, Lumi began to reintroduce activities that demanded patience. They picked up a book that had gathered dust for months. The first few pages were a struggle. The eyes darted toward the empty space on the table where the fadap used to lie, and the brain demanded a faster pace. Lumi forced their focus back to the ink on the page, following the lines one by one. It was hard. The reward was not instant. But as the story took hold, the frantic itch to scroll faded, replaced by the deep, quiet rhythm of following a narrative to its conclusion. Next, Lumi returned to movement. They walked to the park, not to burn calories or track steps, but to feel the ground beneath their boots and the air against their skin. The jog was slow, rhythmic, and entirely unmonitored. There was no screen to validate the effort, no notification to mark the finish line. Yet, after 20 minutes of steady motion, a different kind of clarity emerged. The brain started to find satisfaction in the act of moving itself. It was a biological recalibration. By choosing tasks that offered delayed rewards, Lumi was training their neural pathways to tolerate the gap between effort and result. The system was no longer stuck in a loop of constant seeking. It was learning to settle into the substance of the work, finding that the process was not an obstacle to be bypassed, but the very place where satisfaction lived. Lumi closed the notebook, the soft thud of the cover hitting the table echoing in the room. There was no pull, no phantom vibration in the pocket, no sudden spike of anxiety demanding the next hit of information. The afternoon had settled into a steady, quiet rhythm. Lumi looked out the window at the shifting shadows on the lawn, observing the way the wind moved through the leaves. It was not a grand, cinematic revelation. It was the texture of an ordinary hour, an afternoon that would have once felt like a prison of boredom. Now, it felt like a room with the windows thrown open. The desire to reach for something else, to fill the space with noise, had simply dissolved. It had never been a matter of finding something new to consume or a better way to distract. It was only a matter of waiting for the internal static to clear. The capacity for contentment had been there all along, buried under the constant, relentless demand for more. Lumi leaned back, feeling the solid weight of the chair, the cool air against their skin, and the steady pace of their own breath. There was nothing to check. There was nothing to update. For the first time, in a life defined by the search for the next, Lumi sat in the quiet and realized that the present was finally enough.